Welcome to the Workforces Podcast. I'm Julian Alsid.
And I'm Caitlin Lemoyne, and we speak with innovators who are shaping the future of work and learning.
Together, we unpack the complex elements of workforce and career preparation and offer practical solutions that can be scaled and sustained.
This podcast is an outgrowth of our Workforces consulting practice. Through weekly discussions, we seek to share the trends and themes we see in our work and amplify impactful efforts happening in higher education, industry, and workforce development all across the country. We are grateful to Lumina Foundation for its past support during the initial development and launch of this podcast and invite future sponsors of this effort. Please check out our Workforces Podcast website to learn more. And so with that, let's dive in.
Caitlin, in so many of our recent podcasts, we've discussed AI and its impact on the future of work and learning. We're all grappling with where this new technology will take us and its long-term impacts on education and the workforce. However, we've spent less time exploring the platforms and tools that support effective online learning at its core.
Indeed. While online learning feels ubiquitous and like it's just always been there, many organizations still hold on to static content like PDFs, textbooks, and other print materials, which weren't really built for today's digital-first immersive learning environments. And other institutions have adopted advanced technology solutions, but find themselves challenged by how to most effectively integrate tools into one seamless platform or experience.
Yeah, to really modernize, you need partners who can engineer that transformation. It requires deep expertise in both learning, design, and software engineering, and you need teams that can build everything from custom platforms to AR simulations to fully accessible digital content at scale.
Which brings us to our guest today. We're joined by Tom Riendeau, Vice President of Workforce Learning and Skills at Magic EdTech, a provider of AI-powered digital learning solutions. Tom has spent over 35 years driving enterprise growth at the intersection of learning, technology, and workforce transformation. He's served as a trusted partner to higher education institutions, career training providers, and ed tech companies, enabling them to reimagine their content. And we are looking forward to speaking with him today. Tom, welcome to the Workforces Podcast.
Thank you so much. This is a terrific opportunity, and I'm thrilled to be here.
So, Tom, to kick us off, please tell us a bit more about your background and what led you to your role at Magic EdTech.
Sure. I have always been focused on education. That was the goal coming out of my undergraduate years. I student taught and then said, I want to do something different. And I was very fortunate to get a job as an academic advisor at one of the first, what we would call online universities in the early 1990s. And I had a really special moment there. I was an academic advisor to nursing students. And at that time, that institution was set up to direct students to learning that already existed in their local communities and sort of aggregate it into a college degree. Spent almost my entire day on the phone with students. And I was on the phone with a student who was pursuing her nursing degree, and she burst into tears on me and started to tell me about what was going on in her life and how if she didn't finish her nursing degree by the summer, all of the disaster that would mean, not only for her, but for her children and how she was newly a single parent and all of the stress. So it wasn't even an education conversation at that point. It was really about what's going on in your life. And that thread has continued through my career. Now, it has a happy ending, which is why I like telling the story. I got her calmed down. We had a lot of conversations over the spring. She worked incredibly hard. And then at a graduation ceremony that summer, I saw her kids holding up their Yay Mom signs. And that stuck with me, right? So it was not planned, but I had an opportunity to join the academic publishing world through a partnership that school had with one of the largest academic publishers. And that sort of led into new opportunities to start to look at the early days of digital learning. And so the common theme, because of where I had started my career, each of my employers let me dive into career-focused education. Let me work with their customers who were delivering that education, whether they were career colleges, whether they were the extended campuses of traditional universities as they were getting into online, whether they were certification companies, but with that common theme of how do you change a person's life? How do you help them advance their career? And what does that mean, not only for them, but for their families? And as you start to think about it, I started to realize the impact that I was having on entire communities as I was helping more and more students far outside of my limited capabilities to teach English to some 12th graders who didn't want to be there. And I say that cynically. I mean, with lots of, I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, with lots of love for what my parents accomplished as teachers and the lives that they changed. But really, I'm proud of all of that focus on working adults and their needs and seeing them as not just as learners, but as human beings with families and communities.
That's a compelling story, Tom, and glad you've stuck with us. Very mission driven. So you've worked now then in a bunch with different types of organizations, plied your trade. And so what are the types of challenges that your clients face, and how have those changed or evolved over the years in this space?
Sure. So there's some constants even over those entire decades. And those constant challenges are helping clients understand their local business needs, making sure that the solutions that my employers were developing for them match what's actually needed. And it may be directly for that company of what they're trying to accomplish. But getting that match right rather than just building things in a vacuum has been a constant throughout the decades. The other piece of that is the constant is acknowledging that human face of the learner. So focusing in on what are the support systems. So are the businesses that are going to employ the learners, are they focused, are they supporting and creating an environment where the learner can advance? Is there a family structure that's supporting it? And that doesn't have to be a traditional family. It could be neighbors, friends, extended family, what's out there, and helping find those folks who are going to be part of that support ecosystem. What's started to change, though, is the student experience with technology. And that's a relatively new evolution. I talked to one very, very large national career college provider. I remember going to a conference of theirs, and they had done research where they found that they were losing slightly more than half of their students within the first 3 minutes of their online programs, that the student experience at the login point was so complex that students were just throwing their hands up and saying, I can't do this. And what a disaster that was for them from a business perspective, but also the human loss of, hey, here are all these learners who were excited enough to log in, to choose a program, to get ready, and that they were gone on day one. I mean, that's an absolute crisis. And that's where a company like mine can really help in looking at that and thinking about what's the experience of that student. If they've got 20 minutes on their lunch hour, are we making this as easy as possible for them to get into your programs? Is everything opened up for them and seamless so that they can see the value right from the beginning? Because with a few minutes, things get in the way and it becomes easy to create excuses not to continue. And then, of course, just within the last few years, some very welcome things. A renewed focus on durable skills. And, there are lots of terms that we're using for that, whether we mean soft skills, which is kind of an unfortunate term, but durable skills, life skills, socio-emotional skills, that sort of social intelligence that workers need to advance in their careers, to move on to more leadership roles, to move into middle skill jobs. You need that basic skill set. And that's been welcome because I don't think there's enough focus on that. It's also, what's changed is we're now thinking about how can we actually integrate that into all aspects of the learning, as opposed to having it be the thing you do for one session at the beginning and then we forget it. Like, how do we actually make that part threaded through all of the learning? I think is essential.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm sure I'm going to get lots of questions about this, but what's just happened in the last year or two around AI and how that's moving. But that's, I'm sure, a whole separate conversation.
It is a conversation unto itself, but I think that the changes you've raised are really fascinating, right? I mean, this focus on it's the student experience with tech, but it's not just the curriculum that they're engaged with, but also
Exactly.
their whole experience with everything from enrolling to logging into their first course to, I would assume, engaged, like interactions with their instructor or interactions with how they're assessed or graded, right? I mean, it's kind of like that whole learner journey, so to speak. I'm curious, given your role in this space, what are some of the biggest needs that you're seeing emerge across, can be K-12, it could be higher ed, and I know you mentioned the workforce as well. I guess I see that learner journey as one piece, but what are some of the other needs you're seeing?
I'll talk about the technology first because that's my everyday and in my current role. Each of those technology pieces that you just talked about, the registration, the experience with the curriculum, some of the hidden pieces around billing, the structure of the organization. Most organizations have purchased those systems individually, siloed, and not really thinking about the full ecosystem of their tech stack. What's become really essential and as a focus of my role is just talking about that data integration across multiple platforms. So see how they can work together better and how the organization, whether it's a higher education institution, whether it's a career college, whether it's a certification organization or a company, how they can get actionable data out of that about how the learner is moving through their education. That's become really critical. And we're far enough into the technology that a lot of the original systems we all invested in are becoming a little long in the tooth and need to be modernized.
I'm curious to hear you say a little bit more too about what you mentioned about the durable skills, right? Like, I think that's a really interesting focus, and recognizing that not only the importance of them, but how to integrate them across curricula and what it looks like to build, really curriculum and assessments that are grounded in how do we know people can do these things well?
Exactly.
What does that look like? Would be curious to hear a little bit more on that end as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be part of every course at some level, and it has to be measurable and demonstratable. And from my focus, and obviously I have the bias towards career education, towards workforce, but I think it goes across all levels of education, including K-12, is actually creating a work product. So if you have that authentic experience, if you have that contextualized learning, then there ought to be something that you're creating that becomes part of your personal portfolio that demonstrates that not only do you understand the content, but that you're actually able to apply it to real world problems to show how you would implement that and to show that you can work in a team setting. All of those things require strong social intelligence. And so, I was talking to some colleagues when I was an undergrad, 99% of what I did was individual work. I have a senior in college right now. The majority of what he's doing is actually teamwork. And I think that's really important to be able to learn those skills, to find out how do you actually negotiate a project and the work that goes into it with your peers without an instructor interfering. How do you build up those skills to recognize what it actually takes to deliver a high quality product? And then to be judged as a group on what does this work product actually look like? So that's what I mean by threading it through. I think if you have an authentic learning experience, necessarily it's included, but when you're writing the syllabus, when you're thinking about the learning design, those durable skills have to be part of every aspect of the learning design, as opposed to just making it, hey, here's a 20-minute segment where you can click through PDFs and you're done, and we'll send you a certificate that means nothing.
Yeah, it is so interesting, and we're finding this in our work as well, that this weaving in the durable skills is just central. And I think that we kind of lived in such a bifurcated place where there was the academic, path and the vocational path. And one was really about durable skills and higher order thinking, and the other was about doing stuff. And seeing these worlds coming together, everyone, such a greater awareness about how the worlds need to come together, where through, we spend a lot of our time around project-based and competency-based kind of models and skill, where it is all about the full spectrum of skills that we bring to bear to work. And so that too has been coming more and more to the fore of late. And I think it has to do with another topic you raised earlier, AI. And so would love to hear you talk a bit about how AI has affected and is impacting your work and the solutions that you bring to the table.
Well, thank you for that, Jillian. I'm going to start with what you said, the technical phrase, doing stuff, right? Because the whole point of if AI is going to have value, then it has to help you do stuff, right?
Right.
So I think it's first understanding what AI is and what it isn't. It isn't some magical tool that creates things out of thin air. It is a prediction engine. So thinking about that, okay, then where can it actually help us? Now, some very practical things. It can help us by looking through documents that we've created, whether that's code or whether that's a content, and helping us identify, does it go where we expect it to go? And if it doesn't, let me flag that and show that to a human being who could be part of that and drive that to find where the prediction model is going off the rails. So for my company, where Magic is really focused is in a number of really essential areas for AI. So the first is around accessibility and compliance. There are some upcoming deadlines for accessibility for higher education that we're helping our higher education customers meet. But not only the retrofitting of accessibility, but when you're building new content, to build it accessible first, compliant first, that actually helps all learners. I'm stealing that from one of my colleagues, but our vice president for consulting, had a great line about that if you do it right from the beginning, if it's born accessible, if it's born compliant, it actually makes the learning better for absolutely everyone. And so we can use AI to catch things that our human eye wouldn't catch, that we don't have, there's just not enough time. It can help us speed up that review. The other place where it can help you is in noticing where what are the potential pitfalls around data integration. So if you're creating that sort of unified student experience, does it model out the way that you would expect? Is it actually creating something seamless? And how can it help you make suggestions for how the student experience can be better? And then, it's a lot of what we do, but it's a really interesting tool for course development. And I don't mean in terms of actually designing content that's unique to a college, unique to a certification organization, but what are the commonalities? Have we covered the syllabus that really is going to deliver skills and learning to a student that's going to be useful to them as an employee and useful to their employer? Is it actually advancing their career? Giving that structure first helps build better content. And then once you see that, and once the AI has helped to establish that from certification rubrics, from common ways that a course is built in a particular area, then now all of a sudden, when you know that you've got that solid foundation, then building learning that's unique to that particular client becomes that much more powerful. And then you can really take off and do good things, as opposed to starting from a place of, I'm going to build something unique and then retrofitting it on the back end to make sure that it's accessible, that it actually is meeting the certification requirements, that it is advancing the career. Doing that first, it's sort of like building the foundation of a house. Getting that right first is where AI can become incredibly powerful.
I feel like, we're hearing more and more about where AI can augment work and really leave more of the creativity and judgment and kind of the creative thinking to employees. And I think what you just raised is a really interesting example of that, of how AI can say, okay, well, using the tools to say, what are the baseline things we need to consider here as we're designing this? And then once that's in place, thinking about, well, okay, now with that in mind, what might I do differently? What might make this unique? What might make this customized for a particular client? I think that's a really interesting example of how AI can augment things.
I think it's important to treat AI, to think of AI as your assistant in it. It's got to be a human-centered approach, but having a really smart assistant that can say things like, "Hey, did certification requirements require this particular learning objective? I don't see it here. Did you mean to leave that out? And should that be part of this healthcare course you're building? Because that's in every other course that we're seeing out in the world." That helps you build a stronger content for your learners so that you're not missing things. And those are the kind of mistakes that if you're doing it manually, everybody's going to make along the way. So you've essentially got a really powerful assistant that can make the learning tighter. But to your point, Caitlin, yeah, exactly right. It allows for more creativity on your side because you're not worried about having missed something.
So Tom, we're interested in hearing what practical steps you can offer our listeners to help them become forces in effectively adopting digital learning solutions, in this complex and ever-changing environment.
So I'll tell you what I tell my clients. I think it's really essential to have a partner that you can rely on that can do the things either faster or better that aren't your core skill sets. So that's one piece of it. But what's really critical is, do you have a partner that understands the true strategic initiative you're trying to solve for? So, one way that you could that as an outsourcing company, for example, like ours, could approach things is to say, here's a list of all the great things we do. And that's probably duplicated across lots of different companies. Where it becomes really powerful, though, is when that partner can help you see around corners. It can help you understand what you may not be seeing yourself. Okay, so it's a line item. You have to do the accessibility work, but does your partner understand why you need to do that? You need to do that because there are hidden costs to doing it wrong. First of all, there's a regulatory cost to doing it wrong, but more importantly, there's a human cost that you may not even see from the learners who don't succeed, who should have been using your products, should have been singing your praises. And if you want the kind of growth that you're looking for, this becomes essential. If you haven't considered, for example, cybersecurity, and you don't have a partner that's really looking at that, what are the hidden costs of that? Of not modernizing your system? Do you have an insurance company, for example? I mean, this is the kind of things that I mean by seeing around corners. What happens if, because you haven't modernized your systems, because you just think of it as, yeah, we know there's a little drag from using an older system, but we don't want to make the investment. What happens when your insurance company comes back to you and says, well, we're going to triple your cybersecurity insurance cost because you're using an old system that's not up to the task? And we're not willing to take on that risk for you without a dramatically higher premium. Seeing that before it becomes a crisis, having a partner who really understands what you're trying to do, that's where you can see growth, as opposed to a service provider who comes in and says, tell me what to do and I'll do it for you quickly and charge your rate and then disappear. Helping find those organizations that can add value from that first conversation, come in and say, okay, you want to talk about this particular problem that you're facing. Let me tell you, where the industry is going. Let me tell you what value I can add to this conversation and create that partnership that's really going to give you the growth that you need.
The value that comes from looking around the corner, I feel like, there's so much to be said for that. And I feel like that's what we're all trying to do, right? Is to say, where are we now and where are we headed and what can we predict, so to speak, because we're certainly in a fast-moving, fast-paced landscape that is the future of work and learning.
You want the ideal sales conversation, if you're on the buying side of that, should be this kind of a conversation. Where is the back and forth? What is your service provider bringing to the table? How are they responding to your questions. And I love those kind of conversations. I want a sales meeting where there's lots of vigorous back and forth and pushback. I love it when a customer is like, wait a minute, I don't want to do it that way. Why should I do it that way? And, a lot of times they have a really good reason for doing things, but that's where you get the kind of true value as opposed to, otherwise you just order it on Amazon and be done with it. And I think for workforce education, it's got to be much more vigorous than that. It really needs to be a true partner.
It's such complex work. And as you've pointed out, touches on so many aspects of an organization and learning. And I feel like this is becoming like a love fest for contractors and consultants here. But, this is why we get hired to do what we do too. It's
Exactly.
sometimes it helps to have an outside look and partner that's just going to kind of raise questions and see things in a different way. It's really, having been on both sides of the fence, as we all have, it's really difficult when you're in an institution trying to innovate.
Well, it's also a matter of understanding what you do well and what you don't do well and where you need capacity. There's a lot of good reasons to say for us to hire up a team to do this, to learn this skill set that's kind of outside of what we do. By the time we start seeing a return on investment, that could be months and years. Whereas, hey, for a really effective solution, we can just outsource that and have somebody who's already done all of that work and done all of that investment who can come in and work with us and understand us and help us grow that much more quickly. So it should be seen not as a cost line that disappears, but really as an investment in growth. And I think, the right partner is part of your investment and growth strategy, not a line item that you have to deal with.
So, Tom, thank you for taking the time to join us today. As we wind down this conversation, how can our listeners learn more and continue to follow your work?
Absolutely. First of all, find me on LinkedIn, but please come to our website, and I'm sure we'll put that in the show notes, but magicedtech.com. I am trying to be at every workforce conference. So if you see me and recognize me, please walk up to me and say hello. I love having those conversations at events, but look for our website and for LinkedIn. We also have a fun Instagram account that my colleague Kiara is running that can give you some of the insight into our day-to-day and how we're not just head down, but we're also having some fun on the side as well.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Tom. Really appreciated the conversation.
An absolute pleasure. And I thank you for your time as well.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and appreciate you tuning in to Workforces. Thank you to our listeners and guests for their ongoing support, and a special thanks to our producer, Dustin Ramsdell. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or want to check out more episodes, please visit workforces.info/podcast. You can also find Workforces wherever you regularly listen to your favorite podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you're interested in learning more about Workforces Consulting, please visit workforces.info/consulting for more details about our multi-service practice.